I've already prepped the eye with a light wash of foundation on the lid set with powder, and then I'm going to go straight in with a MAC paint pot in the shade Lay and Low, which is effectively my eye primer. So it's going to waterproof and crease proof the eye area and make sure that our shadows have got something to stick to. I'm using a flat firm brush, and I don't have too much product on my brush, and I'm ensuring that I smooth all of my edges out to nothing so that when I apply my shadows they don't grab onto the edges and reveal them. I'm taking this right up to the brow because it's a great colour that is very similar to her skin tone, so it doesn't matter how high it goes. Now we're going to use a tissue, the natural edge of the tissue, to measure out and get our wing for our client, and we're going to get her to look straight ahead so that we can measure this angle. And I'm using the last centimetre of her lower waterline as it inclines. I put the tissue hard under the lash bed, and then I have to remember that we are going to connect the bottom to the top. So I drop the tissue down about 2 mils in the exact same angle that I had it on. Now you can see that I am applying a dark shadow to the outer third of her eye, and I'm making sure that I really pack that colour into the tissue's edge so that my wing is nice and dark and strong. It's important to use a dark shade for this because it doesn't look quite right with a light shade. So make sure that your colours are strong enough, and also I prefer to use a matte for this. Now I'm only taking this out as far as her socket line is high, and when it comes out to the outer corner where it stops, and I'm keeping my edges really soft so that when I pick up my next transition colour I can blend this seamlessly. Now the next transition colour that I will add is a medium tone one, and I'm focusing my brush in straight strokes that are actually in line with her brow tail, always coming onto the tissue to ensure that I get my strong edge. But importantly, I'm keeping the edges soft and I'm focusing the brush only on the edge of the dark colour. I'm not dragging the brush all through the original colour, so I'm blending with a purpose so that we don't drag that dark colour up higher. So you can see that I'm coming right into the inner corner, and now I'm picking up my last transition colour, my lighter shade, and as we're working, we're going further out towards the tail and right up to the brow. And doing this, taking the shade right up to the brow, eliminates any edges whatsoever, so you have a seamless smoky eye. And you can see that I'm always coming onto the tissue so that when this tissue comes off, she will have a dark to medium to nothing wing on the outer edge of the eye. Now, it's important to do the little window in the inner socket line that often gets missed where I am right now. That often gets missed and it can make the eyes look quite puffy. So we do have to make sure that we come back in and add a little bit of product just above that socket line in the first third in the inner corner, which is what I'm doing here, just reinforcing that, just to make the eye look more finished, because a lot of shadows can stop right in the center. Okay, so now we are using a shimmer to highlight the highest point of her eye, which is the center of her eye, where her eyeball sits. This is the MAC pigment in the shade Tan, and I'm using a firm flat brush to apply this, and I'm ensuring that no shimmer creeps up past her socket line, so that when she opens we have a clear point of difference between where the shimmer is versus where the matte shadows are. And this is my rule of thumb: no shimmer past the socket line. Okay, so moving on to eyeliner now, we have to make sure that we don't make the liner too thick on certain eye shapes, because if they don't have a big mobile lid that we can see, we'll take up all of the space with the liner and we'll lose all the detail. So to keep this liner nice and razor fine, I'm just literally pressing in the cream liner into the base of the lashes and coating a little bit of the skin. As soon as you start to drag your brush, you will get a thicker line. So doing it this way, you may get a few bumps and edges, but I always smoke away the liner with a dark shadow. And you can see that I'm moving right into the inner corner of her eye here just to finish it right to the end. And now I'm picking up an angle brush with my dark shadow that is dark enough to disguise the edge of black. So this is obviously covering up any errors that we may have made and smoothing out the liner, but it's also softening the look. So we've got a dramatic look, but we've kept it nice and soft by doing this part of the makeup. So now we're going to curl her lashes, which is really important to finish a makeup. If you don't have visible curled lashes that are going straight up, the makeup can look quite mediocre. So it's very important to curl them. And I'm using the Model Rock Pro Edge lash curler here, and I'm doing it with her eyes closed. And that allows me to do it with her eyes closed, the fact that it's so small. So we're giving them a nice curl, and then we're going to go in with our mascara, and I'm putting a tissue underneath the lashes so that we don't get any product on the skin. But if we did get any mascara on the skin, most waterproof mascaras will pick off the skin and not disturb the rest of your eye makeup. So just let it dry, get a cotton tip and pick it off, and it'll be fine. So you can see that I'm also mascaring with the eyes closed because it's just easier for me, easier for her. She's not blinking, she's not watering, and I can get right to the base of those lashes. And then I'm going to get her to open and look straight ahead so that the bottom lashes that did get a little bit of mascara on them don't set in with the top. And I'm just going to give them a comb out so that they're all pointing in the straight right direction. And then once that's dry, we will work underneath the eye, and I go straight in with my paint pot that we used on top of the eye in Lay and Low with a bullet brush. And I'm basically just waterproofing the under eye area here. So not too much product on the brush. And then we're going to go back in with our liner to line the inner rim of the eye. So I'm using the Erin Big Cream Liner here in Onyx, and I'm using a flat, firm brush. It's almost like a mini lip brush, and I'm using it on its side and gently pulling her skin away from her eyeball. So it's really important, if she had contact lenses, that I do not get any of this on the lens. I'm going to connect the inner corners right to the inner to create that real cat's eye, and I'm going to go on the top of the inner as well to make that V, just to give it a bit more drama to the eyes. But if she had narrow set eyes, I certainly wouldn't be doing this part of the makeup because it will bring her eyes closer together, which is not what we want. And then we're going to connect our wing from the top to the bottom. So we go back to our dark initial shade that we used on top of the eye with an angle brush, and she must look straight ahead for this part of the makeup so that the connection is seamless. And we want to stop this. We're tapering around, but we're stopping the shadow right in the center of the eye, which is the lowest part of the eye. And this is the part of this technique that knocks the roundness out of somebody's eyes. So if I simply went all the way to the inner corner with this dark shadow, I would merely be drawing attention to her exact eye shape as it is, and I've done nothing to alter it. But if I stop it in the center, it makes the eye more elongated, lifted, more cat's eye, and no more roundness. So now we're going to soften the edge. So we're using a bullet brush again here with this second transition color that I used on top of the eye. So we're just softening down those edges because on its own that dark shade is a little bit too severe. So we just want to soften that up a little bit. And then we're going to highlight the inner corners of the eye, so that first third of the lower lash line with the tan pigment from MAC that we put on the mobile lid. So we're just lightening and brightening the eye, and you'll notice that I work in thirds. When I'm doing eyes, you never work in halves. It's always 1/3 across, 2/3, or all the way, which becomes a block smoky eye. So moving on to lashes, I'm using the Model Rock individual lashes, and my preference is individuals over strip just because they look nicer in my opinion. You can tailor them to the individual, they're more comfortable, and I'm using a mixture. I always use a mixture of textures and length. So I'm using the Model Rock double mediums and regular longs, and I'm doing my first row of mediums, and I'm allowing a gap in between each one where my regular longs will go. So you'll notice that I am also doing this with the eyes closed because again, it's easier for her. She's not blinking or watering. And you'll also notice that my first lash laid down was in the direct center of her eye, perpendicular. And that's important so that you get every other lash that wraps around on either side of that will be on the right angle. And we're finishing off with a shorter lash, so the medium one, in the inner corners. So you always want your inner corners to be your shorter lashes. And alternating the lengths and textures just gives you that real fluffy lash look. And you may hook some of these onto the bottom lashes. So I'm going to let her sit there and open once they're almost dry so that they stay on the top. And now I'm just reinforcing the waterline here with the Erin Big Cream liner, just to close up any further skin gaps between the liner on the inner rim and the shadow. And now we're moving on to mascara, where it's really important to again have this tissue under here. If your client has extremely short lashes, it's a great way to take advantage of every single lash that she's got without worrying about it getting it all over the skin. So we take that off and we comb out the excess. And if your client has extremely long bottom lashes, I tend to just focus on the roots of the lashes rather than dragging it through to the ends, because they can look a little bit untidy, a little bit spidery looking. And we're just finishing this look by hitting the very ends of the false lashes. So basically this is making the look more dramatic, making the lashes stand out more, and blending them in with her already mascaraed lashes. So you can see that this look is quite dramatic, but it's actually a really quick look to do. So if I'm time poor, this is the look that I will pull out if my client wants something quite dramatic, because it almost does the blending for you. It puts the shape in automatically by using the tissue. And on the note of tissues, I'm using the Aldi tissue. So the cheaper the tissue, the firmer it is. So you don't want anything too soft, otherwise the crease in the tissue will distort and you won't have your sharp line there. And some makeup artists may want to use tape for this look. I prefer to use a tissue because the tape can give me too sharp of a line, whereas the tissue gives me more of a defined line, but it's not razor sharp. Just to recap on the looks that this eye technique would definitely be most beneficial to would be round eyes, because it takes the roundness out of the eye, hooded eyes because it knocks the hood back, and your downturned eyes because it's lifting and lengthening and elongating. So the eyes that I wouldn't do this look on would be somebody that already had quite upturned eyes, part Asian eyes, or eyes that were really sharp almond eyes already, because those types of eyes need a little bit more softening. They already have what we're trying to achieve here. And another note that I will mention is that I do my base first for makeups. That's totally up to the individual. There's no right or wrong. But for this particular look, I do suggest that you have some foundation coming out to the outer corners of the eyelid so that your shadows have got something to travel onto and stick to. So you're not going to get a nice strong shadow coming through if there's no moisture for it to stick to. So just bear that in mind for any makeup artists that are doing their eyes first. And one more note to mention is the angle of the tissue must be measured out with the model looking straight ahead, as well as the connection of the wing when you're working underneath the eye. The model must look straight ahead so that it all lines up evenly. And with your first dark shade that you lay down, be very careful that it does not go past the socket line and does not have a hard edge, because you'll never blend it away with your transition colors.